It might surprise you to know this, but in February of this year, Uber announced that it had finally made a profit for the first time in its 15-year history. For a company that had been running at a loss for 15 years, this was a very huge milestone, and we are all very interested in how they did it. Don't go anywhere as we discuss how Uber finally turned a profit. The story of this global ride-sharing app began in Paris in 2008. Two friends, Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp, were attending a conference, and one winter night, when they couldn't get a cab, the idea came to them. What if you could request a ride on your phone? And this idea continued to build in Camp's head, and when he turned to San Francisco, he bought the domain name ubercab.com. He later convinced Kalanick to join him as the chief incubator of the company, and this was in 2009. By 2010, the service was officially launched in San Francisco, and the company name was shortened from UberCab to just Uber. The ease and simplicity of the Uber app contributed to its growing popularity. By just tapping a button, a user could order a ride. GPS would pinpoint their location, and the fare would be automatically charged to the card listed on the user's account. Still in 2010, Uber received its first major funding, which was $1.3 million. Led by the first round capital. In early 2011, it raised another $11 million, and this funding allowed the company to expand from San Francisco to New York, Seattle, Boston, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. A branch was also opened in Paris, where the idea for the service first took root. In 2012, Uber expanded what it offers by introducing UberX, which provided a less expensive hybrid car instead of a black car service. By July 2015, Uber had become the most valuable startup in the world, valued at $51 billion, and in June 2016, it raised a further $3.5 billion from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund. Despite all the funding and how popular the app was among customers, Uber did not progress without its issues. There were continuous legal battles and accusations of unfair competition. The company was even banned from providing its services in several cities, and this forced them to adapt their operations. Internally, there were also some leadership struggles that affected the company. After accusations of a toxic work culture and aggressive leadership approach, Kalanick stepped down from his position as CEO in 2017, and it took a while for Uber to regain public trust under the new leadership of Dara Khosrowshahi. In May of 2019, Uber's IPO made history as the biggest first-day dollar loss in IPO history in the United States. Before its IPO, Uber was valued at $120 billion by Wall Street analysts, and this would have made it the largest company ever to debut on the stock market. However, after the IPO, it was valued at about $69 billion, which is a massive decrease from its former value. Over the years, Uber has expanded from just a ride-hailing app to also acquiring a food delivery app, Uber Eats, Postmates, UberX Share, which allows multiple customers to share a ride, Lime Scooters, which allows customers to rent an electric scooter through the app, and the Uber self-driving cars. Despite Uber being one of the most closely followed and fastest growing companies in the world, it has struggled to attain profitability, especially in its core ride-hailing business. You might be wondering how exactly a company that has so much going on does not make any profits, and why is Uber struggling with profitability in its core business? Now, we will discuss why and how Uber has been operating at a loss. For you to understand why it is a big deal that Uber finally turned a profit, you first need to understand how and why they have been operating on a loss for 15 years prior. Throughout Uber's life, there have been questions as to whether it can ever make money. Despite Uber being asset light, meaning that their drivers are not actually classified as their employees, they do not own a fleet of cars, and their drivers pay for their own gas and cover most insurance costs, the company was still losing a lot of money for consecutive years. In fact, from 2014 to 2023, the company lost a cumulative sum of $31.5 billion. Even though regulatory challenges and investment in future technologies are some of the reasons why Uber has been losing money, the major reason is that it was losing money because it wanted to. Simply put, that was their strategy. Uber has followed a loss leader growth strategy that is similar to what some other tech companies like Amazon have used. When it comes to this strategy, the idea is to operate at a loss so as to quickly gain customers and market share. It involves offering services at a discounted price, even if it means the company is running at a loss, in order to attract customers. This is exactly what Uber has done. In its early days, the company offered significantly cheaper fares compared to traditional taxis, and through this, They basically priced out the competition. The aggressive pricing strategy, though below operating costs, enticed users to abandon hailing cabs and opt for using the more conventional Uber app. Uber did not only provide incentives to its riders through lowered fares, it also provided incentives for its drivers through various means of including sign-up bonuses, guaranteed earnings, which meant they sometimes paid the drivers out of pocket, and also earned boosts during peak times. This strategy essentially wanted to make sure that there was a large network of drivers who could enhance service reliability and reduce the waiting time for customers. And while the loss leader growth strategy led to a large pool of loyal and satisfied customers, the subsidy Uber provided its riders and the incentives it provided its drivers meant that its operational costs were very high and no profit was being made. This is how Uber was running on a loss for 15 years. Anybody can tell that while their growth strategy was successful, it was not sustainable in the long run, and the company needed to start making profits. So, how did Uber eventually make a profit? Well, let's talk about that. The formula for making a profit is very simple. When the revenue of a company exceeds its expenses, profit is made. Uber's expenses were more than its revenue, which is why it was running at a loss for a long time, and the company recognized that something had to change. There are two things that can be done in this situation to ensure profit. The first choice is to increase revenue, and the second choice is to reduce expenses. Uber chose to do both at the same time. Over the years, Uber's revenue has been steadily increasing. This is not surprising, as the strategy of the company was to gather as many customers as possible. Many customers mean just as much revenue. However, Uber needed more revenue than they were getting, even with the same number of customers. The sensible thing to do in this case is to increase the price of rides. In 2018, the total amount of money paid by Uber riders was $41.3 billion. However, in 2023, the total amount increased to $68.9 billion. And this was not only because of the number of rides increased. Though the number of rides increased from 5.2 billion trips to 9.4 billion trips from 2018 to 2023, the amount of money made in 2023 wouldn't have been possible without Uber increasing their prices. The company admitted to this, blaming inflation for the hike in prices, but studies have shown that it might just be part of their strategy. Now that they have a loyal customer base and a near monopoly in many markets, they can slowly increase their fares in order to make a profit. Increasing their revenue was not the only step Uber took towards turning a profit. We said earlier that they employed two tactics at the same time, and the second one was to reduce expenses. This tactic can be said to be more important than the first one. How has Uber reduced its expenses? First, it gradually reduced the discounts, promotions, and other incentives it offered riders. This means that the company might no longer have to sometimes pay drivers out of pocket in a bid to reduce costs for riders. They also reevaluated their driver incentives and introduced a more balanced system that rewarded efficiency, loyalty, and completing rides during peak hours while also saving the company money. Uber also increased its number of drivers, which allowed the company to reduce the pay for each driver per trip while collecting a percentage of earnings from more drivers. These tactics employed followed the simple profit rule of expense being less than revenue. And finally, in February 2024, Uber announced that in 2023, it had brought in over $37.2 billion in revenue and made a net profit of over $1.8 billion. This was the first time in the 15-year history of the company that it made a profit. And there you have it, folks. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. And until then, see you in the next video.